Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the SAIEE Presidents Invitational Lecture. Tonight, we'll be discussing Enhancing Manufacturing Competitiveness in South Africa, a perspective on supply chain logistics. Before we start, a few webinar considerations. Attendees are reminded to ensure the volume is turned up on their device. Ensure you have a stable internet connection. This will ensure the streaming and audio will run smoothly. Attendees can ask questions via the questions panel located within the GoToWebinar control panel. By default, the control panel is located on the right-hand side of your screen. The chat function is reserved for webinar organizers and panelists to communicate with attendees. Attendees will not be able to chat with each other, however, are encouraged to ask questions. A recording of this webinar will be made available on the SAIEE YouTube channel, SAIEE TV, under the SAIEE playlist. This channel is updated regularly, so ensure you check back as often as possible for new uploads. And please click on the link that appears in the chat box to subscribe to our TV channel. It's free. A certificate of attendance will be issued a few weeks after this webinar once we have received the CPD validation number from EXA. I'd like to introduce you now to our host tonight, Professor Sunil Maharaj, our SAIEE President. He is a full professor in the Department of Electrical, Electronic and Computer Engineering and currently the Dean of the Faculty of Engineering, Built Environment and IT at the University of Pretoria, South Africa. He has a combined experience of more than 32 years in the industry as a microwave and RF design engineer, academia and consultant. He holds a BSc Engineering, MSc Engineering, MSc Operational Telecommunications and a PhD in Engineering. He is also a professional engineer registered with the Engineering Council of South Africa, EXA, a fellow of the South African Academy of Engineering, a fellow of the South African Institute of Electrical Engineers, and a senior member of IEEE. He joined the SAIEE in 1997 and has been a member of the SAIEE for the past 25 years. The IEEE South Africa section, ComSoc chapter chair for 5 years, and since 2018, the founding chair of the IEEE SA section Vehicular Technology Society chapter. He has organized many conferences and technical events such as IEEE Africon, IEEE ICC 2010, and as General Conference Chair for IEEE BTS 2019 Wireless Africa Conference and the 2020 World Engineering Education Federation and Engineering Deans Council Conference. He has been the first African Dean elected as the Global Engineering Dean Council Chair and will assume the chair position from November 2021 to 2023. Sunil has more than 155 international peer-reviewed conference and journal articles, 2 international patents, and a winner of 10 national and international awards. His research interests are wireless communications, focusing on 5G cognitive radio sensor networks, resource allocation, OFDM, MIMO system, and wireless channel modeling. I hand you over now to our president. Thank you.
Thank you, our program director. Good evening to our keynote speaker this evening, Ms Portia Derby, our office bearers of the South African Institute of Electrical Engineers, our EXCO members, our distinguished council members, the SAIEE personnel, including the acting CEO, our members at large for the South African Institute of Electrical Engineers, our distinguished guests from all over the country and abroad. Welcome, good evening, and thank you for joining us for the 2021 President's Invitation Lecture. This evening, we are indeed honored to have the Group CEO from Transnet, who's joining us today as a keynote speaker. But before I present more on the keynote speaker, I would like to salute all our women for this being Women's Month. And of course, especially the women on the South African Institute of Electrical Engineers Council for the sterling work they are doing, and especially under the leadership of our Prudence Madiba, the head of the technology and leadership chapter, and of course the women in engineering who are doing great work. And I'm sure many of you have seen that's coming through the mail, especially our SAIEE members, on the sanitary drive that's being done by the Women in Engineering chapter to assist our disadvantaged girls. So I call upon our members at large and those that are here today to please go to our SAIEE website and sponsor whatever you can, whether it's 50 Rand or 100 Rand, or whatever the amount is, so that we can collect this money and use this for a noble cause. So thank you very much for those that have supported us and those that are going to support us. And of course, for the other work that we're doing under Women in Engineering, I'm sure you have seen our August edition of our WhatsApp magazine, and what a good spread of our leaders across the country and across the South African electrical engineers, the women that are leading in engineering and hopefully leading us into the next generation of women leaders across the spectrum that we need in this country. So coming on to our President Invitation Lecture tonight, the President Invitation Lecture was started since 1980. That was the first lecture on transportation in Southern Africa. And how ironic today we're talking about transportation in a different way some many years later. So that's very, very interesting. And of course, Ms Portia Derby is a current Group CEO of Transnet SOC Limited, appointed in February 2020. She has occupied senior positions in the South African government during the period of major economic reform. Ms Derby is a former Director General of Public Enterprises, responsible for corporate strategy and structure of the investment portfolio, and former Chief Operating Officer of the Department of Trade and Industry. During her tenure as Director General of Public Enterprises, Ms Derby provided strategic direction to state-owned enterprises. Ms Derby's career in government started at the National Institute for Economic Policy as a financial researcher, where she played an integral role in working on the quantification of the Reconstruction and Development Program. We all know the RDP program. Ms Derby was also part of the founding team of the National Investment and Trade Promotion Agency, and later became its Chief Operating Officer. She has previously served as a non-executive director of Met-Air Investments and SAFPOL. Ms Derby has also worked in the private sector as an executive director, Clients Africa at Oricon, now we know known as Zutari, an international engineering and infrastructure advisory company. In that role, she was a key driver of the client strategy on the continent, serving on the company's South African Management Committee and South African Board. Ms Derby holds a Bachelor of Science degree majoring in economics and geology, an honors degree in economics from the University of Natal, as well as a master's in business administration from the University of Witwatersrand. Tonight's topic is Enhancing Manufacturing Competitiveness in South Africa, a perspective on supply chain. And you know, this is a very, very important topic for the country, where we are trying to drive investment, competitiveness, and economic development to address the three negatives we have in the country, that is poverty, unemployment, and inequality. And Ms. Derby, thank you very much for gracing our event tonight and also honoring us in presenting this talk. And we're really looking forward to your presentation. And over to you, Ms. Derby.
Okay, my goodness. I hope I'm unmuted now, right?
Yes, I can hear you.
Thank you very much. Good evening, Prof. Sunil, Maharaj, President of SAIEE. I'd also like to greet the Deputy President, Mr. Prince Moyo, the office bearers, Acting CEO, the members of council, and members and guests. I spent many years as a public official, and what's this? The whole diplomatic etiquette never quite stuck in my head. I'm sorry. Thank God I worked in the more commercial spaces in government. But really, thank you very much for the invite. And I appreciate the fact that it's Women's Month and I get to speak. But mostly, it's a topic I like. And it's not only a topic I like, it's a topic I spent most of my life working in the public sector. And even when I was on my own in my consulting, actually, which was a lot of fun, working on this question on how do we help the continent to industrialize. So it's actually quite amazing to once again get the opportunity and the privilege to do this from this space. I think I'm asking Palisa to help run through the presentation. Palisa, can you go to the next slide? Okay, I'm not sure who's the, is somebody at SAIEE driving it, or are we driving it ourselves?
I'm driving it, Minx.
Oh, okay. Okay, thank you very much. Now, I just wanted to be clear. So we've spent the last, what is it, almost 18 months in Transnet. A lot of you would know Transnet as engineers, and I imagine that a lot of you also come from consulting companies. And there is a particular Transnet that you know that has a particular posture and the way of looking at itself. So it's quite interesting just working with the organization, trying to get it to review and relook at itself going forward, and how we become more of a collaborative player with others and bring them on to participate in the work that we're doing. At the very least, how we've started looking at our work and the company and how we develop strategy. We look at these that we've indicated, excluding agriculture, are the top commodities that would generate 80% of our revenue as Transnet. On the right-hand side, where you're looking at the revenue contribution, it just shows you also the relative contribution of the different commodities to our various operating divisions. Agriculture is a priority. It has become an area that we're looking at, especially as it ties up with the reconstruction, economic and recovery reconstruction plan of government, but also it is a massive user of our ports. And also, as you would know, it's a high value, it's one of those genuine high value export earners that we have. Automotives and containers are what for us are proxies for manufacturing. They're not great, the volumes are low, and they reflect two things. One, manufacturing is dead in South Africa. You look at the data, we look at this every time it's it confirms, it's a confirmation once again, that actually a lot more work needs to be done around manufacturing if we're going to be able to get out of the doldrums that we are in terms of jobs, the growth, economic growth, because it is a real contributor when it pumps. And then there's the obvious other, which is the commodities. And now when there's a bit of an upswing, and God knows how long it's going to last, but everybody keeps on talking about a decade. We are seized with the question in Transnet. And yesterday, actually, we had a fantastic workshop with the mining chamber, Minerals Council, to see how we might work collaboratively to better ensure that we participate in this upswing of South Africa, because the last one, I think we woke up when it was a little bit too late, and hence the importance of partnering. Can you go to the next slide, please? I've got okay, I'll try and call for the next slide faster than what I needed so that we don't waste time. So this was just important for you to get a sense of what's our planning framework for Transnet. Those of you who know that on iron ore, the maximum capacity that we can move is 60 million tons, and the core constraint on that is actually at the port, where the air emissions license limits us to 60 million. But we're working hard to look at other ways by which we might more aggressively deal with air quality and the emissions that we have, and also talk a lot more to the mining houses to ensure that by the time we get the ore, frankly, doesn't stay too long on the stockpile. And number two, we come with them having done some dust suppression for the mine. Some of the clients do it, some of them don't. So what we increasingly need to do is to have everybody do their own suppression before we take the ore from the mine. So the target soon is to get to 67 million tons, and we think that there's room to get up to 74 million tons before we have to look at significant additional investment. On manganese, the industry say that the market size is 22 million tons, and so in some ways we're planning in that direction, but we definitely have the intention of sharing the risk in as far as that's concerned. Coal, we see, and we've clearly come out and we said we will not increase our capacity beyond the 81 million tons. And one major project that we had, which we've had to downscale, was the Waterberg extension. We're going to end there at 9.5 million tons, and we're not going to go beyond that because the only commodity that was intended to move was coal. So it'd be interesting to hear what Botswana is planning to do about moving coal in Mamabulo, but we think they could connect quite easily to our infrastructure without it having an adverse impact on ourselves, because we just don't see significant growth in coal in the coming years, not with global warming, and as we can see what's been happening lately. Chrome magnetite, really important that we get as much of this as possible on rail. And we have two exit routes that we are growing. It's Richards Bay, as well as the port of Maputo. Definitely an important. Maputo gives us a fast turn in our locals. And then obviously autos and containers. We're planning to grow to 11 million TEUs on the back of what the port master plan, but we're being very conservative around that. We will grow as there's growth, but two major autos ports will be PE, the port of PE, as well as the port of Durban. The port of PE is not called Gqeberha, the port of Gqeberha, by the way. The city is called Gqeberha, but the port is still called the port of Port Elizabeth. And then fuel and gas. Please, can you go to the next slide? So fuel and gas, gas is a new area of play for us that we're going to do much more work. You're engineers, so you should love this busy slide. But please just forgive us. What we were trying to do was to do strategy on a page. And this is actually, it's all of the strategic interventions that we've identified, which are prioritized. So we have a way of running. Some of them are faster than others. You would have read in the press that we are doing, in fact, we have issued an RFI for a partner for TPT, Transit Port Terminals in DCT Pier 2. And that is to get an international operator to work with DCT with port terminals. The intention there, get planning capacity, modernize our equipment, and frankly, we've got to go to semi-automated ports. What we are finding is that the winds are becoming quite a serious problem, even right up to Durban now with global warming. Our cranes can operate up to 120 kilometers, but at 65 kilometers, the person on top gets scared, so they come down, so we stop operating. But if we move towards semi-automated operations, we would be able to operate at 120. And that, by the way, as people who work with calculations and indices, has a huge impact on where you rank on productivity. And this is like, it's mind-numbing trying to argue with people so that people can ask questions about what the data, but also it's in bad taste to sound like you're over-complaining. And then the second RFI that we've issued is the Ngqura Container Terminal, and there we are looking for a partner who owns cargo, because the intention there is to have a transshipment hub, but also we're quite peculiar and particular, let's say, in the cargo that we want. We'd really like rather somebody who owns a lot of intermediate manufacturers who have not manufactured the final good, because that means that the IDZ, which is attached to the port, would be able to do a lot more of manufacturing, because then we would do the final assembly in South Africa. And that's when transshipment really is value adding to your economy. We've got enough skills in the Eastern Cape, which are advanced manufacturing. We'd like to see more than just Nike techies being stuffed and de-stuffed, but you know, it's revenue in the end, and it helps. What is important about this is that it brings in the large vessels. Can you go to the next slide? The rest of the projects, you can look at them. There's the big terminal that we're looking at in Gqeberha, at Kucha, to move manganese. That is also going to be an expression of interest out. We've appointed CDCSI implementing agent for that project, so you be on the watch out. Might be interesting work for you. We're quite interested in certain instances to hear truly creative, world-leading ideas, which move us a little bit ahead of how we've always done bulk materials handling in South Africa, open stockpiles and the rest. And like with the environmental standards going up, we've really got to start thinking about how we have stockpiles which are a lot more efficiently closed, but also which are efficient utilizers of water. I love this plan. I mean, I suppose because it's a really, for us, it's really an important development. I think many people think that we are nuts and it's one of those grand dreams and ideas. It's very simple. If we do not get back our position as a hub port for Southern Africa, or even Sub-Saharan Africa to our mind, we're just going to be in trouble. We will be an also ran kind of economy. So it is absolutely crucial for those of us who are true patriots that you make sure that we deliver this project successfully as Transnet and as South Africans, and that actually we meet the benchmarks and the timings that we've indicated. What we've decided to do is to front load the development. Now, front loading the development means that we develop faster than we can see the volumes. And that's on purpose in one hand, because what we found at Transnet is that there were projects that we've been planning to do for 100 years and we just never did it because we said we would organically grow. We let the revenue growth determine the point at which we can do the investment. And that's why we are looking for partners. So number 2 is Point Terminal. It's currently 200,000 TEUs. The plan is to increase that to 1.2 million TEUs. Ideally, we're aiming to issue an RFI towards October, November this year, for a partner to work with the National Port Authority. I think you're going in the wrong direction. For the partner to work with the National Port Authority to develop that terminal. What is important about that is that we have the terminal running. Remember, I've indicated the RFI to bring in an operator for DCT. DCT is there around the number 7, Pier 2. Is around, so that we can, whilst Point is out, we ensure that we meet our productivity and efficiencies on the rest of the terminals that we have available, so that we don't cause a bottleneck in capacity availability at the port. So this increases our capacity to 11.3 million TEUs, bigger capacity than even the dig out would have been. And in fact, the dig out then, which is 2012, I think, or 2016, was going to cost us about 70 billion rand, 70 to 92 billion rand, I think. What we've kept this development at is at 100 billion, and that's that. And we've told Pepe Silinga, some of you would know him, is an engineer, one of your fraternity. We've indicated to him that he doesn't come out beyond the 100 billion and he delivers 2032. He assures us that we will. We've appointed Dr. Bridget Gasa Tuboti to be the project, the portfolio director for this investment in Durban. If you can see, this is not a discussion about the master plan. So, but if you can see by number 9, we're going to have a lot of the companies that are in Island View having to move to Richards Bay. So she has to also deliver Richards Bay development as well, pretty much in tandem. Next slide, please. I know this is supposed to be about manufacturing, but I mean, it would be just wrong not to talk about that. So to get to rail manufacturing, so I find it fascinating. I was recently talking to some of the iron ore mining companies, and they were really flummoxed to hear that we do not manufacture any rails in South Africa. We don't. Nobody in South Africa manufactures rail. So it's a project that we've started working on with the IDC actually as the lead on the project, and we've been very clear that we will buy from you, from whoever you find as the partner who was going to invest in it, and we're willing to commit to a 15-year supply contract on very commercial terms. Our contracting, we've gone through a process. We've got a new procurement policy that's been approved by the board, which now needs to be lobbied and worked through government, whose intention is to ensure that we procure fast and much more efficiently than what we currently do, and actually ensure that we pay market prices. Just as an example, I mean, we in the current policy, or the old one, because we've got a new one, basically, or we're supposed to be in a bit of a lacuna, could take anything up to 18 months to procure something for 200 million. Now, I know I'm talking, if you come from an engineering firm, you know that this has to be true, given the number of tenders that have been coming out of Transnet. What we're trying to do with this new policy is to do high value tenders within 2 to 5 months. Now that changes the world completely on our side, but also I know that for a fact it would have a serious stimulatory impact on engineering firms, on manufacturers and the rest and the like in the economy. So really important that we review our procurement so that we can enable this this procurement to happen. But it's going to be interesting to see if we're going to be able to have a scale operation at our scale demand, because the demand in South Africa is fixed. It's PRASA, it's Transnet, Gautrain to some extent, and then we hope that we might be able to export into the continent for maintenance work and the rest and the rest and like. Unfortunately, we have both the head hardened rails and also the lighter spec, which is more for GFB, general freight cargo, available. But really interesting development. We'll watch as it happens, but we're definite firm supporters of this. It will help us with the logistics, actually, because at present, for us to get, we buy minimum length is 120 meter length rails, and then we have to get them butt welded in South Africa to make them 240. You're an engineer, you know what we're trying to reduce is the weaknesses that arise at the welds. Next slide, please. I'm trying to go fast. I was told I got 20 minutes only. No, this is a bit of detail. I mean, we'll make the slides available to you. You can move on to the next slide. It just details what I've just indicated. What is important for us is that whatever we do is the specification. So we've been talking to our R&D and tech teams, and we've got massive tech teams, both inside Transnet Engineering and TFR, is that whatever we do, our specifications have got to become global specifications. This is just Transnet Engineering. Not many people know about Transnet Engineering, and it's starting to become a really interesting space. It is completely unromantic, but I tell you, it's the only sensible strategy for South Africa and the continent, right? Everybody wants to make a new trinket of one sort or the other, wants to manufacture a new this and a new that. But I can assure you, for you to have market access on the continent, you are not going to get there. I'll show you 2 developments that we have. And so what I've been arguing with the team is that we have to be better than world-class, and we have it in us to be better than world-class when it comes to re-engineering, to remanufacture, and to maintenance to a level that ensures that even our old infrastructure is able to be remanufactured in a sense, right? To a level that it operates as well as the best. I often worry whenever there's a policy or view that says everybody must go standard gauge, because I keep on saying, have any of us really paid attention to the balance sheets of most governments? It would make a lot more sense if we're able to maintain, bring up to speed that which those countries already have. And they have got 2 things. They've got the rails. They may not be as extensive as we'd like them to be. They've got the locals and they've got the wagons. If we were able to actually build proper MRO facilities on the continent, we might get to a point where we might buy our own independence. Next slide, please. So TE, which for us is the hub of manufacturing, but even in their case, they'll tell you, their focus in the organization is not manufacturing, because we're not buying from them as Transnet. Nobody else is buying, and if we're not buying from them, it means that there isn't really a market for new products. However, they have really made a lovely logo, which is called the TAL. And anytime you are in Kudusport, but it's about to leave, the 3 are going to be deployed into operations in Saldanha. But anytime you are around Kudusport or Saldanha and you want to go and see the TAL, let us know. We'll arrange for you to go and see the TAL, because actually it's fantastic South African engineering. I mean, virtually everything in the TAL has been made by us, for us. Nobody's IP, it's all our IP. The problem, we need to belong, it has to be a product that is one of the large global OEMs product suite. And we think we've got the possibilities to do that. The other area, which is quite a fascinating area, and so I'm still arguing, I'm having an argy-bargy with the team. Our wagons are designed, I mean, everything we have, are designed to last for like 40 years. I have met wagons on our facilities when I was starting in primary school are still in full operation with hardly any damage whatsoever to them. So I say to the guys, those of you in manufacturing know that manufacturing is about turn, right? Is that you can't have a thing that's made every 40 years, because when the hell else are you going to manufacture? So I talk to the engineers and I say, chaps, have you considered the fact that you've got other engineering friends who are in manufacturing who are never going to get work because you're designing for 40 years? And then I say, and number two, the Chinese, are they designing 40-year wagons, or are they doing, and everybody comes back and they say, Chinese doing 10, 12-year wagons and dead, and then you replace them. I said, well, that's the market. So it's an area that we're moving into, because obviously it suggests then that we must use different materials. Our construction methods must be different. And because we're South Africa, not China, right? Everybody's going to expect us to produce a product that lasts forever at cheap price, because we have to then compete with very low prices. But it's a very interesting moment in terms of getting a lot more commercial, because we were previously not. Manufacturing here is designed to be sanctions era busting or resisting at the end of the day. Modern manufacturing, which is about being commercial and being able to compete, is entirely new. And then the last one, which is really very exciting for us, is TE has just gotten into port equipment, and that's for the first time that we're making a vehicle. It may seem like the same space, but it's not entirely. Our hauler is much more efficient than other hauliers. It can do containers, 2 containers at the same time. So definitely much more efficient, but truly exciting that we designed that our own. We are trialing it right now, and it's going through its last tests at Gerotech, and it should be able to be deployed. And if it functions and it works well, we should be able to get orders from TPT. First of all, you know that you've got to, if you're an exporter of any sort, you have to control 60–65% of your domestic market before the rest of the world will take you seriously. If you don't get there, you're not going to survive. And that's why we are being a lot more pragmatic on the strategy. Next slide. I think it should be about the second to last one. No, this just talks to our geographic distribution, and in fact it's an area that we are working on consolidating. We can't be in so many manufacturing spaces, and we've got huge capacity. And in fact, you know, if there are any engineering facility faculty members who are in the call, other than you, Prof. Maharaj, we're more than interesting to talk about how we might partner in some of our facilities with your university students, provide opportunities for some interesting back work on our side for the design, because we've actually got quite big design capability as well. Next slide. Yeah, this is basically the last slide. So we've also got a really exciting project, and I can't wait for the results of this to come out. We're working with the DTIC as well as TIPS. I can't remember what TIPS stand for, but it's a trade policy unit that was set up by the DTI years ago to look at a sector strategy for rail, should I say, rolling stock manufacturing in South Africa. We are asking ourselves the question is that should we be manufacturing every single component that we require? Shouldn't we as Transnet and TE start choosing areas where we have to own the black box in a sense, right? And then be an integrator and let the industry at large do some of the manufacturing, and we buy from them and we consolidate and we build whatever it is that we're building, either a wagon or we're building a locomotive or now even hauliers, is that to move so that there's actually enough work for an industry that's the size of the market that we have. But bearing in mind, the argument that we're making is that the bigger opportunity is in the space of maintenance and working to ensure that we have effective logistic systems on the continent, which we can afford as the people in the continent from our governments and from our taxes, instead of always being dependent on handouts. Next slide, which I think is definitely the last slide. I didn't know. I'm not. That wasn't my slide. Somebody else put that slide in. I'm disavowing myself of it. But that's just the people that we are working with on that project. Thank you very much. I think I've taken a little bit more than what I was given, but I'm open to take questions. But as you can see, Prof. Maharaj, there's actually so much that we're doing in Transnet. And the reason why, in part, I agreed to this opportunity is that I think the more we all as South Africans understand the opportunities and what's there, the better it is for all of us. In fact, number one, psychologically, we just like get a little less depressed. And number two, as Transnet, we are really being open to having engagements with people who are willing to run ahead of us and start doing stuff, hey, you know, but so that by making it clear that this is where we are coming and what we plan to do, I think we provide the possibility for active engagement of everyone in the economy. But thank you very much once again.
Thank you, Ms. Derby, and thank you again. And of course, certainly, I think the SAIE will definitely take on the opportunities you mentioned there, because I think the things you mentioned, for example, about mentorship, we have a lot of experienced engineers as members who are keen to mentor people for what we call the road to registration. Maybe they want to register as PR engineers or even help them in the career. So we have mentors. Our members are keen, and certainly, I mean, Transnet has a big cohort of engineers or young engineers that I'm sure we can support them and assist there. And certainly, we'd like to take up the opportunity you mentioned about internships and experiential training. We have a student chapter, student branches across the different universities, and students are always looking for opportunities for experiential training or internships. And certainly, yes, we would like that opportunity to be afforded to our student members as value, but also give them the opportunity to get experience so that they become kind of work ready, so to speak. Even if they don't get a job at Transnet, but at least it's helping to develop the skills base in the country for the broader good, as you mentioned, what Transnet is trying to do, and great for that. So there's one question here. There's a couple of questions, but the first one is basically, it's saying that with the international coal market reducing in favor of renewable energy, and we want to become more greener, and also South Africa shipping further away than Australia from Asia and China, is there still a need to increase the coal line capacity to 81 megatons per annum?
Yeah, look, I mean,
can I
sorry,
one or two questions?
Yes, yeah.
Can I tell you maybe 2 or 3, then you can answer them in one go. And then the other one is, they says, what is Transnet's roadmap regarding AI and 4IR? Yeah, I think you can go ahead.
I don't know. Let me start with the easier answer, right? I think the engineers will kill me, so they better come and tell me what they're doing with regard to AI. They haven't shown me anything, and as all of you can tell, I'm an enthusiast, so I would be there at short notice. Look, to a large extent, one of the big things that we have to do, and this is where we're just most of our attention and money is focused for now, internally with all of our engineering cohorts, is just dealing with the backlog in maintenance right across the organization. Ensuring that smart devices, I mean, our locos would be able to track and indicate locations. Most of them, it's not activated. All of our signaling, and that's why we suffer terribly from cable theft. I mean, cable theft doesn't just affect us because of the locos, which are electric, and the fact that we increasingly have to use diesel locos, which is its own problem, right? Especially with the question about decarbonization. But it's you know, toughies, man. We've got to move commodities, so we've got to increase the amount of diesel that we have. In fact, one of the areas that Ralph is the CEO of TE, has got to look at is finding us a partner who uses hydrogen and gas to power the locomotives, because that would at least make a contribution. We also have an aspiration to be carbon neutral as a company by 2035. I think we set as a target. So that's to a large extent. But what we've then done is we have a training academy where we've collated all of our training, our schools. We've got a lot of schools, maritime, engineering, rail, that we've put together under one head. And Tumi is the person who controls the purse, and I gave it to him, and he's got the authority and the power to work with different universities. And I know that we work with University of Pretoria on some stuff which is AI related and some really leading edge. So what we've done is we've decided that we will endow just pure, because I'm a firm believer in pure research and just pure science. The more pure science you do, the better you improve your capability. So we've just endowed it, and it's not necessarily related to anything that we're necessarily doing inside Transnet. Our immediate focus is the modernization of our fleet, our operations, and then to the extent that we can automate and digitize ourselves. That's where our immediate focus. So I'm sorry, we're not doing anything fancier than that, but we are putting money into AI going forward. Getting back to the question of coal, truth is, you're going to have coal for a long time. I mean, we may not like it. I am curious to watch how the debate is going to go now that Eskom is starting a new application at Thuispunt for nuclear. Because I'm clear that if you want to build a manufacturing economy, you need baseload electricity. And gas can't be, because it's also its own emitter, number one. Number two, we don't have it. You're importing the gas, so the costs of power then remain pretty high, or go quite high, if you're going to, because it's an important driver of cost in manufacturing. You want low cost electricity. So the one side of this debate is we somehow in South Africa have got to find a solution for baseload, which is genuinely green. Or less emitting, because actually everybody who's into renewables, and I'm fine with solar, I agree that we must leverage it, we've got so much sunlight, is that we don't talk enough about the chemicals that go into the panels. And actually nobody's been having a bit of a convo about how quickly that degrades in the environment. And I think we have to have like frank conversations about the stuff, you know, and not sort of like talk to each other about in half-truths. So recently, I've been wanting to follow research, because I'm told that China and Japan have the intention of keeping coal, but both of them are adding ammonia to the coal. And the view is that when you add the ammonia to the coal as part of the fuel, you reduce the emissions significantly. So it'd be good to watch that. But we then made the point, if you would be aware, I think at least some of you would be aware, the capacity at RBCT is 91 million tons. But we have then come back and said we're not increasing beyond 81 million tons. There's a project, the Waterberg project, which was supposed to be done in 3 phases. We're now no longer doing phase 3. We've ended at phase 2, which will get us to 9.5 million tons on that line. And then the expansions that everybody's been waiting for on the Overval tunnel, not going to happen. We're just going to strengthen and make sure that it remains a viable tunnel for many years to come, but we're not going to expand it. The reason we needed to deal with the Overval tunnel was if we were going to increase our capacity beyond the 81 million tons. Thanks, Prof.
Okay. Thanks. So the other question is basically, as you know, we try to make the planet a bit greener. And the question is, how do you plan to move more freight, especially from GCT, off the road onto the rail?
You know, so after much to-ing and froing, we've come to the conclusion that we're not the best. We can't do that on our own. So what we're calling that corridor, the Gauteng to Durban corridor, we're going to call it, we're calling it the container corridor, trying to be a little bit transformation from calling it NATCO, which is Natal corridor. So it's now called the container corridor. The thing about manufacturing is that you have lots of companies, a lot of manufacturers, and then each of them want to move 2-3 boxes and not a lot. And remember, most of our trains are either 100 wagons or 200 wagons. Now in manufacturing, that's just a dream that ain't gonna happen. However, in manufacturing, what you want to have is a scheduled service. So we are starting to talk to consolidators, 4PLs and the rest alike, to look at how we might have a business model where they dealt with the consolidation, pulling together, building the trains, owning the wagons, and we would provide a hook and haul service. And we think if we did that, we would be able to move a lot of cargo off-road onto rail. That's number one. But you know, the bigger problem that we all have to deal with in South Africa is cable theft. We collect data on a daily basis on how much, and actually we put that on our website every morning, on what we would have had the previous night. It's ridiculous. And you know, it doesn't matter whether you cut off 100 meters or you cut off 1 meter. It's the same damage. We have to buy, and it's increased the cost significantly because we're replacing it with tiger wire. So we've got to buy the wire, replace it. It's a cost that wasn't anticipated. It wasn't near replacement or anything like that. And we'd like to still keep the system fundamentally electric. We've tried to run a few diesel locos through the tunnels, and they choke and die. So we're not at the point. Our diesel locos can't run through some of our very long tunnels. We need to find a better solution with better oxygen.
Okay, so this may be an interesting question. It says that Transnet seems to have a vast experience and expertise and resources, but is looking for new markets, whereas PRASA has markets, but that must be served, but with very little resource and expertise. So the question is, why not merge the two?
You know, I hope people know that PRASA came from Transnet. It was demerged from Transnet. The one thing that I think we have an obligation to, and we, you know, I'm known, I hold this position. I'm an economist, so for me, the economics of networks are frankly obvious on the one hand, and must drive what you do. And also, frankly, I also believe that we must be real about our history. PRASA as a service and its distributed nature arises because of apartheid. African people were located where they were, and as far as I'm concerned, we have to get to a point where we have a clear cross-subsidies model that cross-subsidizes from cargo to passenger, so that at least infrastructure is not their problem. We find a way to help them to pay for that, and then users then would pay a very reasonable amount to commute on the system. I don't think it's it's different though. Moving people and moving cargo, guys, different. So I think it makes sense that it's in two separate organizations because it is just different culturally. But I do definitely think that the freight system has a role to play to ensure that the passenger system is sustainable. Absolutely.
So the other one is that, I mean, you mentioned some of the manufacturing you'll have done recently, and the stuff, the new rail and the new locomotive you spoke about, that's truly South African development and things. And I think maybe this question may be more for Ralph. Does Transnet have a technology strategy in terms of how much you plan to develop yourself and how much you plan to buy or procure?
So unfortunately, Ralph is not on the call. I mean, it would have been a fantastic question for him to answer. But definitely what the sector strategy is that we're working on with DTIC is to arrive at precisely that answer. On the one hand, from outside, but also internally, we've been saying, guys, what is it that we must manufacture? And that's what I call the black box, in a sense, is that which we must own, which is our IP, and what can be manufactured from everywhere, and then we consolidate parts from industry to build. So it's a critical question that we need to answer, and it's a critical question not just for Transnet, but I mean, if we're going to have a sustainable rail industry in South Africa, we have to arrive at a sensible answer around how we would distribute responsibilities between ourselves and the private sector.
Yeah. So one of the things I think is that and capacity and the next generation of experts in the country is always a big challenge in the country. And one of the questions is, as you know, South Africa has and have very good engineers, but a lot of the good engineers that have a lot of history and knowledge are retiring and so forth. And and of course, like you mentioned, Transnet has many schools and things. Are you doing sufficient, you think, to train the next cohort of engineers and signal engineers and railway engineers, especially looking at ICT technology that's going to be quite predominant in future transportation?
I think our more important contribution would be in the nature of projects that we put out into the market, yeah? Because frankly, there's so many people that we can take and look after. Without sort of you getting lost in the massiveness of Transnet. So more than that, and that's why I talk a lot about the port infrastructure projects that we have. In fact, the Gqeberha project, the manganese terminal project in Port of Ngqura, is really very interesting because we've given CDC quite an open brief. We have said to them, put out an expression, an RFP. I think they're going to go out with an RFP and ask the market who can build us world-class, state-of-the-art, most efficient, environmentally, water and air, manganese terminal that loads and takes manganese, you know, whatever, come with it. I mean, we're quite open. We're not being prescriptive. And I think the more we learn to ask questions in an open-ended fashion, that gives the opportunity for the industry to come up and say, we can solve that problem. This is how we can solve the problem. The only proviso that we're putting out is that when you come out with an innovative solution, best you be willing to back it with some sort of warranty or guarantee of sorts. And if it's a thing that we both agree would quite be useful as leading class, we might then be able to see how we can say, okay, fine, maybe let's jointly share the risk. What we've learned from our recent past is that there are things that we can do. We can operate bloody well. We operate trains, long, big trains, really well. We are shambolic at building basic big capital projects, right? And so it's important to arrive at what it is that you're good at. And so having arrived at what we are good at and what others are better at is the importance for us of looking for a lot more turnkey solutions for others to build the infrastructure, hand it over for us to be able to operate. I think therein lies the opportunity. To seek the opportunity inside Transnet, I think, is not to be ambitious enough.
You mentioned about hydrogen, and your Transnet Engineering is looking into that. So are you kind of looking strongly into the hydrogen economy?
Definitely. So what we've been watching is what is the mode by which you will transport the hydrogen. And we're paying attention to the chemistry of which is the carrier that you're going to use. I was talking to Alec Owen the other day about hydrogen and just trying to get his views, and he was quite quick to remind me that you don't forget that the hydrogen bomb was made and it killed people. And it's funny that his words weren't cold when there was that incident of hydrogen at Madupi, because that was hydrogen coming into contact with air, and you had that problem arising. So we're very careful about how we get involved in this space, but to a large extent, we've said Transnet Pipelines, the CEO, Michelle Phillips, that it's her remit and her mandate to understand and to be the investor on our side on building the infrastructure. So this is the infrastructure for hydrogen. And what we're basically doing is that we're looking at whether can gas be our transmission mechanism into the hydrogen economy. So we're not at the forefront, but we are definitely there, listening very hard to see where it's going to land.
Okay, and then of course, we all know, and has been quite topical in the news, about the cyber attack. So I think, what were the lessons learned from there, and how can we mitigate that in future?
One is that we've got fantastic skills in South Africa. Hey, this we sorted out with not much foreign help, other than an application services provider that we had. But the solution is entirely South African. We use South African companies to support us, and our team internally in Transnet, people trained here in South Africa. So it's been, so I mean, for me, I've worked with South African engineers, not just only in Oricon, but all my life has been working with South African engineering skills. It still remains the saddest thing for me that the Royal Falk never got time, because globally, wherever you went in the world, it was acknowledged as the best fighter helicopter. Sorry to the pacifists in the room. It was the best fighter helicopter ever. But what we failed to do was to effectively commercialize. But so the skills we had. What have we learned? I mean, and this is partly when I was answering, when you're asking the AI question, is that we've got a lot of work to do to modernize, just, you know, and so we're migrating a lot of our applications and our data to the cloud, making sure, I mean, we still had mainframes, guys. I mean, like, really, in 2021, people are still using mainframes. We've got applications which are 30 years old. So yeah, let's just say it's forced us to quickly do a cleanup in that space. But we did very well with the South African support and capacity. For me, just absolutely gratifying. Had a brilliant team internally. As a leader, if you recall, we had just come out of the looting. I mean, and the looting had us all bamboozled as South Africans, because had we ever anticipated a thing like that? And I was just we'd just recovered. I come out and the ports were operating after 3 days, and then in the following week we were hit by hacking. It's not often that you get smacked by things like that, but I must say, old lesson that I was told years ago is that you find a great team and you back the team, and that was all I needed to do, was to back the team. We're out of the woods fundamentally 100% now, and there are areas, obviously, after an attack of that nature, there's quite a lot of areas that you still have to go back and clean. We've got old laptops, we're having to clean that area, get newer ones in certain areas, and the rest and the like. So it's just that kind of housekeeping that we're busy with now.
So I think I'm sure it should motivate why Mr. Moyo should set up the School of Excellence in ICT.
Oh, he'd love that. Hey, I said he must try a hackathon first. I'm willing to back that for sure. Yeah.
I'm sure the university will love that opportunity and challenge.
Yeah.
So I think we're running for time. So the last question, I think, is that you mentioned about investing a lot, and maybe sometimes you want to grow the front end you mentioned, but is the government going to recapitalize Transnet to support strategy where affordability and viability may not be always favorable?
So our first port, I mean, we've been told that there's no money, so we're not planning to approach the government for any recap. What we have, however, been starting to have a conversation about is not so much a recap, but rather support to ensure that our cost of borrowing is not as high as it is. And unfortunately, our credit rating is tied to the sovereign rating. So whenever the sovereign is downgraded, we get downgraded as well as Transnet. So what that means is that our cost of borrowing goes further up. So that's an area that we might approach government, and that for us it makes sense, because if we were able to go get long-term infrastructure, because bear in mind is that most of our assets are 50, 70 years old, they last that long, is that if we can get long-term money, most of the problem with the markets right now, you can get what, 5-10 year money, you can't get 20-25 year money, because 25-year money would be a lot more linked to the assets in terms of the repayment. So it's these kinds of things that we want to have a conversation, is around the debt structure that we have, but not so much to get a recapitalization. And that's why, for us to be able to do the investments that we've indicated, and given the growth rate of the economy, because we grow if the economy is also growing, it's essential that we bring in partners into our projects. And it is also absolutely crucial that we deliver them on time and on cost, because that builds confidence in South Africa as well, and can only be of benefit.
So if I remember correctly, for the media, you were looking for a partner, you're looking at 120 billion or something like that. I mean, do you think you're biting more than you can chew, or you think there's a value proposition out there?
No, so that's a misunderstanding. The whole development of the Durban Port plan, as you see it, is over a 10-year period. Effectively, it's 100 billion. That's our estimate, right? We haven't gone into the market. What we know is that's our cap. We're not paying more than that. And it's the different pieces together that get us to 100 billion. We'll see there's quite a lot of dig out that we've got to do, and rehabilitation that we have to do over time. That's for the whole port, and that we're not asking from one partner at all, but rather it will be pockets, and there'll be pockets that will come out in RFIs. If we went out for one partner, no South African construction company would benefit, because remember, we've decimated those, right? I think there's only WBHO. And the question, if you ask people who has port building experience and marine experience, you don't get anyone in South Africa. So we've also got to find, Pepe and his team have got a really exciting challenge, is how do you bring in global players to build the big part of the superstructure, and then how do you find ways and means of developing small construction companies that they participate, or South African construction companies that they participate in the program as well.
Okay, wonderful, thank you. So I'll pass the program now over to our Deputy President, Prince Moyo, to do the vote of thanks and concluding remarks. Thank you, Mr. Moyo.
Thank you, Mr. President, Program Director, and our esteemed guest, Ms. Derby, for an exciting talk and an update on the strategy at Transnet and the outlook for the future. Really exciting. I took out from your talk the broad potential for growth in different markets, looking at commodities, looking at containers, and then yeah, the Durban port, which we have been reading about, confirmed in terms of a real project, and a little bit of work at Richards Bay. So that is also a takeaway from me, and we are looking forward to that work. Obviously, Transnet, we talk of lifeblood companies and oxygen companies of the economy, and certainly, like you said in your speech, it's in all our best interests that Transnet succeeds, and wherever we can assist, we will certainly do so. And we are happy to hear about the engineering potential and the excellent IP that's been developed, which could have potential for completely local products. The President touched on cybersecurity. We do have a chapter that looks at cybersecurity. We do have a section that is looking at the electronic side of electrical engineering, and so we are looking forward to continued partnership with Transnet. More importantly, we resuscitated a transportation section, which used to exist many years ago, and we know there is a railway chapter also, which is very close to the international organization. So we are cooperating with some of your engineers also from TFR, like Kimane Motupa is one of them, very active, and we're looking forward to strengthening partnerships there. Only two areas that I've mentioned: transportation section and the ICT section, the area of cybersecurity. But I'm sure there are lots of other areas, asset management, that we could cooperate in. So from our side, thank you very much for the update. We appreciate the time and attention to the material that was prepared and presented to us. And we wish you all the best in your role. And we know that you have a good team, and your strategy has been clarified. And with the enthusiasm you've shared with us, we are hopeful that we can only get the best results. So thank you again from the Institute and all the membership.
Thank you very much. It's really been a pleasure, and I know that my other colleagues would be more than happy to meet and present at any forum. What's most important for me is that our strategy is understood and that we build confidence by implementing and doing the things that we said we would do. So thanks a million, and good luck to SAIEE. May you go from strength to strength.
Thank you, and I forgot to mention your ambitious target of shrinking your procurement turnaround. I come from a utility as well, probably as big as you guys are, and we will be looking forward to learning from you how you make adjustments within the laws, definitely to get faster turnaround. So everyone is interested in that aspect as well. Thank you very much. Thank you. Over to you, Mings.
Thank you, Prince. Ladies and gentlemen, just from the SAIEE head office and the staff, I would like to thank Ms. Derby for availing us tonight, giving us your I know you have a very busy schedule. Thank you for joining us tonight. Professor Sunil Maharaj, SAIEE President, thank you for joining us tonight. I know this is your lecture, but thank you for your support. Mr. Moyo, thank you for the vote of thanks. Our acting CEO, Mr. Leonetsi Matutuyani, who's in the background, thank you for your assistance And of course, last but not least, Gerda for organizing this and putting this together. I bid you a farewell and good night until next time. Have a good evening. Goodbye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, I do.